If you're going to be recording any kind of sample instrument, you're going to need to make a plan. One way or another, something's going to go wrong. Hello everybody and welcome to True North Audio. I am Kiko, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that you have to go through to prepare and plan some kind of virtual instrument or sample set. Really, this can kind of apply to any tool you're making, but this is specifically going to be speaking about samples. As some of the people who followed the channel may already know, I am a member of one of the best bands with the worst names ever, Bloody Pineapples. And right now, we're working on an album together. As of the making of this video, at least as of this take of the making of this video, we have passed our original threshold on the Kickstarter we're running right now, and we're looking to get a couple hundred more, because if we can cross that threshold, we can more easily actually make the instrument that I'm going to be talking about, as an example, into something that's available on the free version of Kontakt, the Kontakt player. So if you are watching and want to back that up, and that's still going, link will be in the description if it's already done. You can just support us by buying the instrument when that's out, or even just listening to our music, sharing our music, getting other people interested. Whatever helps. Any way you can help is good. And, I mean, any dollar is a dollar. So typically, when I start with an instrument, the first thing, which is kind of obvious, is what am I actually making? Choosing what you're making is kind of one of those things that, yeah, a lot of the time you can kind of just say, I don't know, this is on hand, I'll make that. I mean, that's kind of how the tongue drum went. I had a couple tongue drums, like, why don't I make a tongue drum? You know, but a lot of the time, what you're making is going to kind of determine what you can do with it. What kind of resources you have, who's going to be involved, what kind of budget you might actually have for it. Because if you're sitting there in your bedroom studio and thinking, I'm going to make a whole orchestra, and believe me, I've done that, I do it all the time, you're not going to likely have the resources to make a whole orchestra very easily. So you kind of have to figure out either, is it a realistic goal, or what kind of creative trickery can I do to actually make an orchestra in my bedroom studio? The next question I tend to face usually is going to be, what features do I want it to have? That is going to probably be one of the most important steps, because the features, your user interface, your articulations, all that is going to be really important in deciding how you record it, how you structure it, how much time you have for it. And definitely when you're planning your time, plan to go over by quite a bit. You're usually not going to have it done as fast as you think you are, even if you have done it for a while. Now, at a certain point, you will have probably done it for long enough that you do have a good idea of how long it's going to take. But of course, if you've been doing that, you also probably still have a good idea of how to plan for the unexpected. And when considering your user interface, you also want to consider what platform you're on. So, are you building in Kontakt? Are you building a decent sampler? Are you building in Sforzando? Are you programming a standalone plugin by yourself? Whatever the answer to that is going to also determine how you record things and how you communicate with the people on your team. When you have an idea of the articulations you're using, get an idea of where you're recording. Now, if you're recording in your own studio and you can just block out time whenever, then good. You're already set. You don't have to worry about any of the kind of planning a space. But when we did the keg, for example, that ended up being in a borrowed space, and that ended up having kind of a time limit on it. And because of that, we ended up not actually finishing all the articulations we wanted to do. I didn't have a chance to mess around with some of the microphones. I didn't have a chance to reset up some of the stuff. I had microphones I had to cut because they were clipping. I had microphones I had to cut because we didn't have the time to plan out a new way to set up. And I didn't have the time to play with other microphones to see what might actually be able to handle the SPL levels we were at. Where you're going to be is going to be very important in determining how much time you have and your budget if you're paying for the space as well. And both of those things are going to make a big difference for you. The next, of course, is who you're working with. And that can be, who are you recording, who is assisting you, who is building your instrument, Who is programming? Who is editing? Is it going to be everything all by yourself, as it is for me a lot of the time? Or do you have a team? And for the one we're working on with the band right now, it's very much a team effort. We got myself, I'm going to be doing a lot of the editing and kind of producing and overseeing. Toby's also doing a lot of that work with me. He and I have been bouncing back and forth with what kind of articulations do we want, what kind of user interface do we want, what features do we want in it, what's going to be realistic. We have our guy Ruben. He's going to be producing a processed version of the samples that are going to basically be processed exactly how they are on the record. We are hiring the builder who did Crim drums for Bogren Digital. That's going to be another thing you want to consider too, is who else is building. If they're not somebody that's in your immediate circle, being able to communicate with them and knowing how they like their files organized, what sorts of things they're going to want from you to actually make the instrument how you want it, using their workflow, that sort of thing is going to be very important. So communicating with your team, knowing who you have and how you're going to be able to get in touch and what sorts of things they want from you, what sorts of things you want from them, depending on who you are in the team, that's going to be very important. Next, of course, you're going to want to think about your gear. So if you got a space, you know who you're working with, you know what sort of things you're actually recording, you know how many articulations you're making, whatever, then you can start planning how. You can start planning the equipment side of things. You're going to plan your mics, you're going to plan your interface, whatever is available. You need to plan, again, going back to the keg as an example, if you're going to be in a space that is not your studio or a space that's not a studio at all, then you have to plan where all that stuff is coming from, how you're getting it there, what you're going to need to bring, and what you should be prepared for. Obviously, all this is a lot easier if you're doing this in your own space. You already know what you got. You already know what space and time you have. You're probably not going to charge yourself for your own studio time. That'd be stupid anyway. But if you're borrowing space, then if it's another studio, you want to know what they have. If it's a space that's not a studio, you're going to want to know how you're getting all your studio into that space that's not a studio. So in the case of the instrument we're building for the Bloody Pineapples record, what we're recording is an easy one. That's our drum kit. The what, however, does also come with what are we adding to it. And in this case, we're talking some elements we're going to be putting in, percussion elements from the record. We're going to be putting a keg in there. We're going to be putting a cowbell in there. We're planning on doing a few kind of one-shots that are built out of like Found Sound and some other like kind of auxiliary percussion type stuff, and even a few pieces of like digital percussion, sort of like drum machine type percussion that we want to add in. Stuff that we're going to kind of add in as layers on the record. We want to have all that available to the people who are actually using the instrument, since that's stuff that we're going to be playing with anyway. But the thing about that is that Sammy, our drummer, doesn't have every single one of those things on his kit. So we had to plan how we're going to get some of the extra pieces and the triggers and all that stuff into that instrument without him recording it. And so we're coming up with kind of a fun plan where we have him record a kind of IR of the overheads in the rooms that he's going to be using, and then we're going to close mic our own percussion pieces that guys in the band who are not him are using, because he's over in Brazil and I'm not, and Toby's in the UK, and we're not able to just run over to his place and hand him a cowbell and a keg, you know? So we're going to be putting our own pieces in on a close mic and using the IRs from his rooms and overheads to kind of place it into the space and into the kit. So planning how we do that is very important. Now, we have an idea of what we're doing. So of course for us, the next one is who's involved. And for us, that all comes down to kind of who's doing what. So like I said, we got myself and Toby doing different parts of the user interface, the editing. Sam, of course, is recording. We're working on how many features we want, what the articulations we want are. So Toby and I are kind of overseeing like the big picture, the broad instrument itself. Ruben is going to be helping process some of the stuff because we're going to have the processed versions of the samples. We're going to have our guy Moses, who's going to be doing the user interface. And once we have the team put together, which we now do, then we can start communicating with each other about what we want the instrument to look like. So we got a little sort of spreadsheet, and we're going over and we're saying, do we want this feature? Do we want that feature? Do we want this articulation? Do we want to voice it this way or that way? We know we're building it on Contact, and we know that the goal is, again, another $200 as of the recording of this video, and we can get it on Contact Player. If you want it without having to buy Contact, please support us. Every little bit helps, and that can get us to the next step. So, of course, planning how you're going to budget it, that's what the Kickstarter is about. That gives us our budget, and from there, we can basically say, these are the articulations, this is our budget, this is our team, this is our platform, this is our user interface, and then from there, we can give all that to Sam and myself and Toby and whoever's recording extra kit pieces and kind of samples and designing the, like, drum, kind of digital drum sounds, drum machine sounds. We go in, we get all the samples, we do our edits, we get our build, and then we work with Contact. If we can get that extra little bit of money, we work with Contact to get it on the Contact Player. And as of the making of this video right now, currently, I don't know what this is going to be 5 years from now, but for the instrument we're making now, it is $1,000 for the NKS license fee, and then it is anywhere between like 4 to 9% of the retail sell value of the instrument per license key. So if it's like $50 at 100 licenses, something like that. I think, if I remember my math right, it's 8% for 100 licenses at $50 retail sale. So we have to plan for that and then kind of build our sale model around that as well. And that's kind of what goes into building an instrument. And again, always be prepared for something to change. Always be prepared for something to not work out, or something to be broken, or something to just not quite make sense. So hopefully that was helpful to you if you're planning your instrument, or if you've been struggling with instruments in the past. Just remember to get out there and start making stuff. Just do it, you know? Grab out whatever you want. Like I said, you can start with something simple. You can start with something you do just happen to have on hand, like a tongue drum or a singing bowl or a kalimba. Stuff like that's really popular for a reason. You know, get into that, start playing around with it, and then from there you can start using that as a way of developing your workflow and your process. Find some friends to work with. Get used to kind of working on a team. Get used to communicating with each other. Get used to allocating resources. Get used to delegating jobs. Get used to maybe getting in somebody else's project and getting a job of your own and working with a team where you're not the one in charge, but somebody else is. You know, get out there and start making connections. Start getting involved in other people's projects.